Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here, and you are listening to episode 298 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. In this episode, I go over a few novel taxidermy ideas, as well as some other alternatives to taxidermy that can serve many of the same purposes as traditional taxidermy without as many of the downsides associated with that. And when I say traditional taxidermy, I'm specifically talking about shoulder and full mounts. Taxidermy is often a very big part of an African safari hunt, so I am including this episode in my ongoing Africa miniseries. However, a lot of the stuff I talk about in this episode can also apply to hunts elsewhere in the world, too. Before we get started talking about that, I am a big believer in wearing quality ear protection while hunting and shooting. I've seen too many cases of people ruining their hearing while they were young doing a lot of things, but especially shooting, and then really regretting it later. Fortunately, there are some excellent hearing protection options for hunters these days that are way better than what we had available just 5 to 10 years ago. I've used a lot of stuff, but the Axle X-Cores are my favorite ear protection for hunting. They're comfortable to wear for hours at a time, their sound quality is great, and they are cordless. They're basically like having Apple AirPods that also provide ear protection and hearing enhancement. And Bluetooth, too, so you can listen to music and podcasts while you're wearing them if you so choose. Bottom line, Axle X-Cores are the only ear protection I'd feel comfortable wearing when trailing a Cape buffalo in the thick bushveld, where your life depends on having all of your senses working at 100%. As a matter of fact, I have done exactly that with the X-Cores, and I was thrilled with how they performed. Do yourself a favor, buy some Axle X-Core electronic earbuds for yourself by clicking the link in the show notes or by going to thebiggamehuntingblog.com/earbuds to get the best available pricing on those earbuds. That's an affiliate link. I earn a commission on your purchase, but it comes at no extra cost to you, and you'll actually get a discount by going through that link. Next, make sure you are on my email list. To do that, click the other link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there to get my free ebook on the best hunting cartridges. You'll get my free ebook when you do that, plus you'll also start to receive the emails I send out every weekday. If you like the podcast, you're going to love these emails. They're entertaining and informative emails about hunting, shooting, ballistics, hunting stories, stuff like that. I get feedback all the time from people telling me how much they enjoy receiving those emails and how much they look forward to hearing from me every day. So make sure you're getting them too. Click the link in the show notes or by going to huntingguns101.com. Okay, let's get started talking about some alternatives to traditional taxidermy. Now, to do that, let's backtrack a little bit and look at the main purposes why people get taxidermy done in the first place. Now, everyone has a little bit different reasons for why they get taxidermy done after a hunt, but generally, you talk to someone, you're going to get a couple different answers, and the most popular stated purposes of taxidermy are some combination of 1, memorializing the hunt, 2, paying respects to the animal involved in the hunt, and 3, being a conversation starter. As I sit here recording this podcast, I'm looking around my office, and as I see the various pieces of taxidermy or other items that memorialize my hunts on the walls, they take me back to the hunt where I took that animal on. I can look at it and I can remember every detail of the hunt. I can remember the weather, what I was wearing, how I encountered that animal, what the shot was like, what it was like recovering that animal sometimes, who I was with. All of those great memories just come flooding back. And that is a really cool thing that I really appreciate about looking at these animals. And like I said, too, you are paying respects to the animal by putting that animal or some piece of it in a place of honor in your home. Elgin Gates has this quote that I really like. The true trophy hunter is a self-disciplined perfectionist seeking a single animal, the ancient patriarch well past his prime that is often an outcast from his own kind. If successful, he will enshrine the trophy in a place of honor. This is a more noble and fitting end than dying on some lost and lonely ledge, where the scavengers will pick his bones and his magnificent horns will wither away and be lost forever. All right, so end of quote. The next aspect, a conversation starter. Do not underestimate or poo-poo this aspect of hunting mementos either. This is a great way to showcase the conservation aspects of a hunt. People that aren't hunters, that quite often, just quite honestly, just don't know any better, often have the wrong idea about what goes on with a hunt. There may be a misconception that when you kill an animal, you just take pictures, cut the head off, and then leave the rest to rot. And of course, they also probably miss the important idea of everything else that goes into a hunt besides just shooting the animal and taking a picture of it and taking some taxidermy from the animal afterwards. So by having some sort of memento of the hunt on display in your house, when someone that you're friends with that, like I said, is a non-hunter comes over, they may see it, they may ask you about it. Well, that's an opportunity to not only talk about the actual hunt itself and whatever animal it is, but you can talk about everything involved in the hunt. Say, oh yeah, this is a such and such animal. I was on a hunt in this country here, and I shot it, and I'll tell you a little bit about the hunt, and we could talk about everything else involved in it too. You can talk about the conservation aspects of the hunt, the benefits of well-regulated hunting. If it pays, it stays, so to speak. Well, yeah, we utilized all the meat, and oh yeah, this animal tasted really good, and by the way, there's all sorts of downstream benefits to the locals. They get jobs working in this hunting camp. They get meat from the hunts. That allows us to preserve the habitat for these animals in a somewhat natural state instead of cutting down all the trees and turning it into agricultural land or building condos on it or whatever, right? All of that can start when someone sees some sort of memento from a hunt in your house or your office. So those are some of the main purposes people get taxidermy in the first place, and those are all great things. Now, the downside of taxidermy, and remember, when I talk about taxidermy, I'm really focusing here on traditional taxidermy in the form of full mounts or shoulder mounts for animals. And we'll talk about some other less traditional or more novel ways of doing taxidermy here in a second. But the downsides of doing shoulder mounts and full body mounts are really, there's two, maybe three of them. One is the space that it takes up and the cost associated with it. And to a lesser extent, there's some legal hassle and paperwork and everything that you got to do to get that stuff back to your home in the proper manner. Some animals is more complicated than others. You're shooting an animal like an elephant or a rhino or something, or other animals that may need a CITES permit or something like that. It's more complicated, but even something pretty benign like a kudu or an impala, it's not as difficult to do that as it is other animals, but there's still a lot of paperwork that you got to do with it. And it costs a little bit of money to do that, and it's just hassle and time that you have to invest in this. So those are the three downsides of traditional taxidermy, especially if you're hunting far away from home. One is just the legal and paperwork and bureaucratic side of it that you have to navigate in terms of time, hassle, money. Two is the space involved in it, and three is the cost. And when you talk about cost, there is the upfront cost of, one, actually doing the mount, actually getting the taxidermy done, the money you pay the taxidermist for his or her work. But then there are all sorts of other downstream costs associated with taxidermy too. For instance, when I lived in El Paso, I had an office that was almost perfectly suited for a lot of taxidermy. It had a lot of long, flat walls in it, just a couple windows and one small door on one end. So I had a lot of wall space that was set up in a way that I could hang a lot of taxidermy in it. And it was really cool. It was a great setup. And it just so happened that the house my wife and I liked when we moved to El Paso was already basically set up for that, with that office for me, and it was a no-brainer. We liked everything else about the house when we bought it and took advantage of it. Well, when I moved to Lufkin, that was not the case. We found a house that we really liked, and I had to turn what was the dining room, what was designed as the dining room in this house, into an office. And the walls and the windows and the doors and everything here just were not conducive to having as much space to hang taxidermy up. And so I was left in a situation where I had all this taxidermy that fit easily in my house in El Paso, but does not fit in my house here in Lufkin. And so are we going to buy a different house, a bigger, more expensive house just to put all this taxidermy in it? Or am I going to throw away some of this taxidermy? Or am I just going to pay to store it or something like that? Because it's just not going to fit in the house that we have here. So right now I have it all in storage. Not all of it, but most of it in storage. So this is a combination of really the first two things I talked about with space and cost associated with taxidermy. It does not take much. One or two big hunts is going to fill up the office or even houses of most average people. Taxidermy can be really big. A kudu shoulder mount is big. An elk shoulder mount is big. Same with a moose. Same with a Cape buffalo. God forbid something giant like an elephant. I've definitely heard stories of people buying bigger houses to fit their taxidermy in, or remodeling their house to add a special man cave or trophy room or whatever onto it. I even knew a guy in Washington. Now, this guy had a lot of money. He was kind of a famous guy that had made a lot of money in another industry and became a big figure in the hunting industry. He bought a big house up in Washington, and when he bought it, the people that owned the house before him had basically a basketball gym separate from their house in their backyard. It was like a half basketball gym. This was a gigantic building. Well, he turned that gym into a trophy room for himself, and he had, between the building itself and all of his taxidermy in this room, he had millions of dollars tied up in taxidermy. No, that's his money. He could afford it. He can do whatever he wants with his money. That's great. It was really cool, going through it, seeing everything that he had in there. He had all sorts of different types of sheep, almost any animal you could think of in Africa and in North America there, and some even less common stuff that you don't necessarily think about, like a capybara he shot on a hunt in South America. But that guy was a multi-millionaire, and he could afford that. I can't. Most other people can't. And so that brings us back to the original point with space and money. One or two hunts in Africa is going to fill up a normal guy's house with taxidermy, and you can spend a lot of money doing that. If I go back and were to write down how much every single taxidermy mount I have paid for over the years costs, I know I could fund another very, very nice African safari just with that money that I spent on it. And that's just the upfront costs associated with it. So the other costs that I talked about besides the upfront costs, when you have all the storage stuff associated with it, and there's also the transport fees associated with this stuff. You got to get it back home one way or another. It is expensive to ship stuff back from Africa to different countries, Europe, North America, Australia, whatever. But it's also expensive to ship stuff within the United States. I've talked with people that have gotten, say, an elk or a bison shoulder mount or whatever done in Montana or Colorado or whatever, and then FedExing that thing to their house, and they're shocked at how expensive it is. It's right up there with the cost of shipping some stuff from Africa sometimes with that. So it's not just Africa that it can be expensive to get taxidermy done, and it really is everywhere. Africa could just get especially expensive because instead of shipping just an elk or a bear or something home, usually you're dealing with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 animals or whatever, and all of that stuff adds up. And then once you actually get the stuff, another cost associated with it that I didn't initially think about was moving. Now, I'm a special case where I had taxidermy and I was in the Army at the same time. And that's obviously, it does not apply to everybody, but I got my first taxidermy done after my very first hunt in Africa back. That was when I was a cadet at West Point, and then I actually received the stuff as a brand new lieutenant when I moved to Fort Stewart, Georgia. I had that stuff put in my very first house I ever bought as like I said, brand new second lieutenant. Well, those two shoulder mounts, which is a kudu and a red hartebeest shoulder mount, have moved 7 times since then. That is between me putting it in storage when I deployed, pulling it back out of storage, and then when I actually moved to different houses. So sometimes I've done it myself. Sometimes I've had movers do it. The very last time I moved, when I moved from El Paso to here, I paid a special company that specialized in moving taxidermy to actually move the stuff from my old house to my current house. Well, the more you mess with taxidermy, especially if you're not careful, the easier it is to damage it. Kudu are especially susceptible to this because they have very, very short hair. But you got to really know what you're doing to do this right in moving it and then storing these animals so they stay in good condition. And that kudu and that red hartebeest are looking a little bit rough now, and that is too bad. I wish I would have been more careful about that over the years when I wasn't as careful moving them. But these things are big. They take up a lot of space. They take up weight that you have to pay for one way or another when you're moving this stuff from house to house to house. like I said, that's a bigger consideration for me than it is for a lot of people, but people get new jobs, they move to new houses and that sort of thing. And you just need to keep in mind that you're going to continue to pay for this taxidermy down the road in one way or another. And the bill does not end when you just pay for it and receive it. Now, I got Condor Taxidermy to do those initial shoulder mounts for my kudu and my red hartebeest. They did great work, but I paid a lot of money for them, and I've continued to pay for them since then. And it was all these little things associated with it. Like I said, finding a place to store it, putting it in a storage unit now, like I have right now, moving it, all of that stuff. I had no idea that those were going to be things I was going to be dealing with 20 years later when I initially shot those animals. Now, the next thing is, what happens to taxidermy after you die? Right, certain noteworthy stuff can go to a museum, right? Jack O'Connor has a museum full of all of his taxidermy. The same is true if you took an especially rare or big animal. Like, there could be big money associated with a true world record deer, for instance. But your average buck or bull isn't worth that much at all. It's probably not worth hardly anything. It may even be sort of a so-called white elephant sort of thing where it may be something that there's costs associated with getting it instead of it actually being worth it. Now, I have 2 deer skull caps from my grandfather, but that's it. He didn't have any traditional taxidermy like a deer shoulder mount or anything like that, but I wouldn't have had space for any, even if he did have it. Now, the problem with that is that even if you have someone that is going to take all your taxidermy when you die, the story associated with that animal often, not always, but often gets lost when it passes on to that next generation. And that's even if the mount doesn't end up in the trash. Now, your duck mount or your deer shoulder mount or whatever is special to you because you went on that hunt. You had all the experiences associated with it. It helps you remember it, but not to be mean or anything, but most other people probably don't care, especially if they're not hunters. I've definitely heard stories of people I know that have, say, gone over to a friend's house and their friend might have had some unique taxidermy from their dad or grandfather or whatever on display and be like, oh, wow, this is really cool. You got this whatever unique animal it is there. Tell me more about it. And the guy you're talking to is like, well, I wish I knew. It was my grandfather's and I never really heard the story behind it. But I thought it was cool, so I kept it. It's your money, it's your house. You can do whatever you want with that stuff. But like I said, you can see how as you get further and further away from the person that initially went on the hunt, got the taxidermy done, some of these reasons that you get the taxidermy done in the first place kind of go away. And you really just have to weigh these costs associated with taxidermy versus the benefits. Now, one way you can go about doing that is just by reducing some of these costs associated with taxidermy. And that changes the cost-benefit analysis a little bit. Because like I said, you can very easily double or more the cost of a hunt with a lot of taxidermy. Now, don't take any of this the wrong way. I am not anti-taxidermy. I have plenty of taxidermy myself, and I really like the things that I do have. However, I've thought about this stuff in detail over the last couple of years, and I've often wondered if there was a better way to do things. Now, if you want to have your house look like a Cabela's or a Bass Pro Shop, that's your business, that's great. But like I said, the average person's home is going to fill up quickly after just a few hunts. And then what do you do, right? Do you stop hunting? Do you build onto your house and build more space for your taxidermy? Those are all choices. It's your money. You can do whatever you want to do, but those are decisions that a lot of people have to make at some point. So what do you do? Now, the purpose of this podcast isn't to convince you not to get taxidermy done. Instead, I just want to make you aware of some other alternatives to traditional taxidermy. And heck, you can even do a lot of this stuff in addition to traditional taxidermy if you so choose. Now, check out episode 264 about the logistics of Africa, part 2, where I specifically talk about taxidermy, and then episode 107 on some other taxidermy best practices. And I go into a lot of detail about some of the things I've learned over the years about traditional taxidermy in those episodes. Now, for me personally, right now, I have taken a tack where I prioritize those traditional mounts for species that are the most important or special to me for one reason or another. Maybe it was a really, really big animal. relative to what you would get for that animal. If I were to shoot a 200-inch whitetail buck or something, or even something smaller than that was still really nice, I'd probably get a shoulder mount done of it. Same thing if I shot an animal that just had a very, very memorable hunt. The story associated with the hunt itself, they were all very memorable and special, more so than a usual hunt. Now, all things considered, I've started to look real hard at non-traditional taxidermy and or other ways to memorialize a hunt. Right, taxidermy goes way beyond standard shoulder or full mounts. I have become a big fan of skull mounts. Looking around my office right now, I have bear, javelina, and jackal skull mounts just sitting on a bookcase. Some animals look really, really good as that sort of a skull mount. Warthog also look really good like that with big tusks coming out of them. Same thing with feral hogs. I also have pronghorn and bison skull mounts hanging one way or another. Both are on skull hooker mounts. The pronghorn is on a skull hooker platform. You put it in there. It has a little hook that goes up into the spinal cavity of the skull, and it hangs there on display just on a shelf. That's how the pronghorn is set up. The bison is set up in a similar way, but on a skull hooker anchored to the wall. Both of those look really good. They're not that expensive. They don't take up a lot of space. And they, like I said, they give me a lot of the same benefits that I would if I would have gotten a pronghorn shoulder mount or something like that. And you could buy those directly from their website, Skull Hooker, or on Amazon. I also have a really cool setup that my dad made for me after our first hunt in Africa. The very first hunt in Africa, I went on my first animal on that hunt. So my very first African animal was a warthog. Really, really nice warthog. I did not appreciate how big of a warthog that was at the time. But we just got the tusks back from that warthog. And my dad has some, I think it is a piece of cedar that he got from a neighbor's barn back when he was a kid or something. This barn was made of a really cool wood and it was getting torn down. So he and my grandfather took a lot of wood from this barn and just set it aside for a rainy day. And we have used that wood to make a lot of taxidermy mounts on over the years. And when I say that, I mean just anchoring the antlers or tusks or whatever to that wood. Cut it up in a nice looking square. It looks great, and it's got the memory associated with that barn, like I told you about. And you can do that with all sorts of things too. You cut down a special tree on your property when you're building a house or whatever, save some of that wood, and then you can use it to build furniture or a mantle or whatever, or you can hang taxidermy on it too. And so you're working both with the special aspect of the wood there and the special aspect of the trophy. Well, anyway, we got this wood from the barn, and I have my warthog tusks just mounted to it like that. And I have warthog have two sets of tusks on their upper and their lower jaws, and I have them set up like that on the wood, popping out of it with my Namibian gold medal for that warthog on it too. It looks great. It doesn't take up a lot of space, and it was very inexpensive to do. And I can look at that, remember my hunt, and then everybody that sees it asks about it. Like, oh my gosh, what is that? That is really cool. And I tell them about the warthog, and it was my first hunt in Africa and how special that animal is to me and everything. And, that's one of my smallest, but one of my favorite pieces of hunting memorabilia in my office. Now, moving on from that, you can get the hides tanned off of basically any animal that you shoot. If you get a shoulder mount done, you can tan the back skin. That's basically the back half of the hide of the animal that's not used in the shoulder mount. Or if you just get a skull mount or whatever, you can get the whole hide tanned. I got a European mount or a skull mount done of my Cape buffalo, and I saved the entire hide of the buffalo. So I have a gigantic piece of tanned leather in my attic right now. And I've used that hide for all sorts of things over the years. My wife has a purse that we made out of that hide. I have a pair of boots that were made from that buffalo. I even have a couple of belt cartridge holders made from that buffalo too. I got those done at, I think the place was Murray's Custom Leather. When I lived in Washington, I just did an internet search and found a place that you could send them whatever leather you wanted, and they would make you, things like belts and cartridge holders and all that. I got a couple of those made. I got one for myself. I got one for my dad. I use that all the time to this day. And that and the purse and the boots, those are all real cool things that like I said, they fulfill all of those things that are really the good things about taxidermy. Because when I tell people that this thing was made from my buffalo, be it my boots or the cartridge holder, people are like, oh my goodness, that is so cool. It's an opportunity to talk about the hunt. And plus, it's also something that I use a lot. It didn't cost that much money either. Now, I did all of those things with my buffalo hide, but it's not limited to just buffalo either. You can get that done with deer or antelope hides too. I had a couple of tanned hides from other animals from that hunt in Namibia. I think a kudu and an eland and whatnot. I had those in storage for a long time, just in a Rubbermaid container in my attic that I moved from Georgia to Washington to El Paso and finally here. And I actually ended up giving those to a podcast listener who wanted to make those into bags for his grandchildren. So it was like, hey, I'm not doing anything with them. You can use them. That's a great thing to do it. And he really appreciated it. The leather quality is great. His grandkids really like it. And that's also really nice. And it's something unique as well. I know Mark Floyd also has a purse that he got made for his wife out of his buffalo that also looks really cool. Now, my parents have, what is it? I guess it's like a small ottoman that's maybe 2 foot square or something that you would, like a footrest that you would put in front of an easy chair. That is just a normal footrest, but they got I think it was a springbok hide tanned, and whoever tanned it did a great job. It's beautiful, very soft, fur's in great condition. Well, they have that put on that footrest, and it looks really cool there, and everyone likes touching it when they come over and everything. They ask about it, all that. You could get that done with a springbok or an impala or a deer or something, especially maybe one of the more unique deer, like an axis deer or something that has such a beautiful hide. You can get something done along those lines to put on the back of a chair or a sofa. Of course, you can get a rug made up out of all sorts of different hides as well, be it buffalo or a zebra is a very common one to do there. You could get it done out of giraffe hide if you so chose. Whatever, a lot of interesting and cool possibilities that you can do with that. I have a bearskin rug in my office that looks great. Moving on from the hides, you can do different things with pieces of antlers and tusks. A hunting outfitter that I hunted with in Zimbabwe had a bottle opener made out of a warthog tusk. And you could do that with a warthog tusk. Lends itself really well to that in terms of size and shape and everything. But I've seen people that have made magnifying glasses using a warthog tusk too, but you can also do it with an antler. I've heard of people making knife handles out of a warthog tusk or antlers or whatever too, or different horns from different animals as well. Certainly a cool and unique thing to do there that, most people aren't going to have a beer bottle opener with a warthog tusk on it, and that's going to just be an interesting and unique thing that you have. You can get a front sight for your rifle made out of a warthog tusk or elephant ivory too if you're feeling really fancy. Now, in addition to rugs and ottoman covers and things like that, I know people make hat bands using a piece of their zebra hide that also looks really cool and unique. And what makes it even cooler is the fact that that is your zebra that you got on your hat that you're wearing around. There was a guy I met in Washington that had been on a hunt in Africa years previously, and he did not have the space or the money for a lot of taxidermy after that hunt, but he told me a story and showed me a photo of a cool setup he did with his kudu where he got the whole hide tanned and mounted on the wall. And then he got I can't remember if it was the skull or just the skull cap with the horns on it, mounted in the center of that hide tacked to the wall. And then he modified the lighting a little bit in his office and put a spotlight that was shining right on the center of the horns mounted on the center of the hide on the wall. And he did a really good job. It looked very tasteful, very nice, and once again, accomplished all of those goals that I talked about with doing taxidermy, and it probably cost him maybe a quarter of doing that kudu as a shoulder mount and shipping it home and all of that stuff. Now, if you have a big dinner table or a coffee table or something that you want to display stuff on, you can put horns or antlers actually on that table. In our camp in South Africa, we have a hollow kudu horn right in the middle of the table, and then surrounding it, you have books and things like that as well. That also looks really cool, very tasteful. I really like how they did it. I've seen other people do very similar things with kudu horns and with other things. And of course, gosh, you can make the furniture itself out of different parts of the animal too. You could make your ottoman out of buffalo leather. I've seen people using different setups where they have different types of horns or antlers that make up the legs of a chair, different types of leather or fur that or the coverings for the body of the chair itself. Do the same thing with the ottoman, do it with a table, do it with a chandelier. Like I said, a lot of different things, different directions you can go with this stuff. You can, of course, just go and buy things like that yourself from novelty type stores, or you can make it out of your personal trophies as well to add that uniqueness and flavor to it too. Now, I am not 100% certain of all the details associated with making this, but I think it is called a shofar. I apologize if I am pronouncing it incorrectly, but this is a horn used in certain Jewish religious ceremonies. It can be made from a kudu horn, and yeah, that's the kudu that you would hunt in Africa. So if you are Jewish or you know someone that is Jewish, you could potentially make one of those horns or something else along those lines from your kudu horn. Like I said, I don't know what else goes into making it other than just getting a kudu horn, but you can at least start there. And I thought that was an interesting thing too. Now, of course, all of those things I've just mentioned are far from the only ways that you can memorialize your hunt as far as novelty or non-traditional taxidermy goes. If you brainstorm a little bit, I'm sure you can come up with other ideas too. But all of them serve that purpose of memorializing the hunt, paying some sort of respect to the animal, and serving as a conversation starter. Heck, you could even just have a vase full of porcupine quills or something like that in it too. All of those things, as long as they're tastefully done and well done, they can serve that purpose where if you have a friend or family member visiting your house, they see it, like, oh, what the heck is this? Well, let me tell you about that. That's from such and such animal. I was on a hunt in this place. I'll tell you the story about the hunt. I'll tell you about the conservation aspects of the hunt, on and on and on. But remember, keep all of this stuff tasteful. Now, another great way to tell the story of the hunt is to do a video of your hunt. Now, this can be as simple as having your buddy take a camcorder or even their iPhone or something like that and video certain parts of the hunt. And that's great. That's an easy way to do it. That's not that expensive. Or you can get a professionally done video of the hunt. We work with a video guy in Africa that does great work. He'll go out there with you every day on the hunt, be there right with you, film all the different aspects of the hunt, right? The accommodations, the food, interactions between the PH and the tracker and you, and show what the countryside looks like, show all of the other animals you're encountering, show some of your non-successful stalks, and of course you show some of the successful shots and stalks and all of that stuff, and can do a really good job of putting all of this stuff together in a neat and tidy package that really does a great job of telling the story of your hunt, everything that was involved in it, to include, but not limited to, just killing the animals. And that's a great way to, one, for you to remember your hunt, and for you to share that story with other people. Because, you and I know that, shooting animals is definitely an important part of the hunt, but there's a lot more that goes into it than just that. And taxidermy and photos and all of that really do a good job of just capturing, say, the end of the hunt. And you have to work a little bit to get all of those other aspects of the hunt out there using that as a start point. Well, the video does a good job of kind of telling it all. Because especially on a hunt in Africa, one of the other really big aspects of it that is very easy to get lost in the shuffle is just all of the other animals that you're not hunting. The giraffe, the ostrich, the birds, the different reptiles that you may see. All of that stuff helps form the mosaic of Africa. Heck, I even remember encountering a colony of bees that flew by us when I was on this hunt in Africa. And we actually caught that on film, the noise of it. We didn't see it, but they flew right over us. And that is something that I had never even considered I would encounter on a hunt in Africa, but it was such a cool thing that I'm glad that we memorialized it in the video like that. And you just don't know what's going to happen over there, what you're going to see, what you're going to experience, all of that stuff. But if you got a video guy with you that is videoing almost everything, they're going to capture a lot of cool stuff that you can share with your friends and your family and all of that stuff. And maybe it will convince them to go on a hunt in Africa at some point in the future. If nothing else, it might help convince them of the benefits associated with this hunt, and maybe give someone that doesn't have a full picture of what's going on. Like I said, if just because they don't know any better, they've never talked to anybody about it before, they can understand all of the other things associated with the hunt, all of the other downstream benefits associated with hunting over there that go way beyond just shooting an animal. And even the actual hunting stuff too. It's one thing for you to be sitting around with your buddies after the hunt and say, oh yeah, we were on this hunt, the grass was really tall, or the thorns were really thick, or that buffalo was really, really close. It is something else entirely for someone to actually see that stuff on video. If a picture tells 1,000 words, a video is like 1,000 or 1,000,000 photographs. Now, different video guys do things in different ways and whatnot, but usually you'll end up with a product at the end of the hunt that is 20 to 60 minutes long, has music accompanying it, and it's edited appropriately and all of that stuff. And sometimes they'll work on it in the evenings after you guys are done, and so you can give input on things that you do or do not want shown in the video, to emphasize things that are important to you, or make sure everything is tastefully done and all of that stuff. And then oftentimes you'll get a thumb drive and can take it home with you right at the end of the hunt. And so it takes up basically no space. You can show it to your friends and family members when you get home. And prices on this stuff vary, but a video guy like that does really good work, it'll cost you $2,000 to $3,000 probably, all things considered, to include editing and all of that stuff to get a finished product at the end of the hunt. And that may sound expensive, but you compare it to the price of getting a lot of taxidermy done, it's a real bargain. And that really is just a one-time fee that you pay for it. You got your video, you got it forever. It's no problem to move it. Storing it is really easy. You can watch it as many times as you want, all of that stuff. I will put a link in the show notes to an example of a video that we did for a guy on a previous hunt that shows just everything that he dealt with on the hunt, and everything is very representative of what a hunt with us is like, and also just how these videos are set up and all of that stuff. And if you are booked on a hunt with us in the future, let me know if you're interested in getting that video guy to do the hunt. He's the same guy that did the promo videos that I have on my website, and he did the video for our podcast hunt that we went on last year, all of that stuff. Real nice guy, does really good work, and he'll sit with you really through the whole hunt, right? You guys are going to be right there next to each other for however long you're there, so you'll get to know each other really well. He's a really nice guy, but that's a good opportunity for you guys to talk, and you can kind of share with him your vision of what you want this to look like, and he can give you suggestions because he's done this a bunch of times and everything, and put whatever music in there you want, all that stuff. Like I said, he does great work. Link is in the show notes. Take a look at it. A lot of other outfitters in Africa in particular, places elsewhere do this too, but in Africa in particular, this is not an uncommon service. It may not be this exact video guy that you get, but a lot of places have a video guy that they work with, and you can probably work out some sort of a deal with a different outfitter if you're hunting with them to get them to video your hunt too. Now, moving on from that, you can also do just a traditional hunting journal. Then this can be as simple or as elaborate as you want. I have an old school composition book that I bought when I was in 7th grade to do some of my English work in. I bought another one just like it that I turned into a hunting journal. And I keep track of all the animals I've ever shot in them, tell all the pertinent details in that story, the weather, what kind of rifle I was using, what animal it was, what the hunt was like, what the stalk was like, what the recovery was like, other notable things associated with the hunt, who I was with, all of that stuff. And I will, of course, update it every time I go on another hunt. And usually when I do that, I will go back through it and look at some of my old entries in it. And it's really cool just to take a walk down memory lane like that and be like, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I forgot about, this hunting experience and such. Man, that was a fun hunt. I was with my dad on that hunt, blah, blah, blah. So that is more for you. But it's of course also something you can share for other people. And that is about as inexpensive as it gets as far as a hunting memento goes. I mean, I think I paid 99 cents for that book back when I was in 7th grade, and I still have it to this day. Now, a friend of mine has taken things a step further, and he has an actual scrapbook, a physical scrapbook that he has made for all of his hunts up until this point, and he is continuing to update it as he continues to hunt. And he went to Michael's or Hobby Lobby or whatever, bought, like I said, a scrapbook that was empty, and then after a hunt, he'll go to the store, go to Walmart or Walgreens or whatever, and print out physical copies of photos from the hunt, put them in the book, and then he'll take interesting facts about the animal that he hunted and put them in there with it too, and various aspects of the hunt and all that stuff, put it in there and puts it on a coffee table at his house, and people that come over can take a look at that and all of that. And same deal. Oh yeah, I was in South Africa and I shot this animal and everything. Let me tell you about it. And there's a picture of it. No, this is a picture of the lodge and some of the other animals I saw and all that stuff. And in that same vein, there's other ways you can do it that are a little bit more high-tech. Scott Spanton, in episode 294, uses a service called Journey, Journi. That is an app you can download to your phone, and you can invite your friends and family members to join you on it. And so while you're on your hunt, you can use it really for any trip, but he was using it specifically for a hunt. You take pictures of different aspects of it. Oh, the airport. Okay, you're at the beach, or now we're driving to camp, or, this interesting thing that we saw. And of course, getting into the actual hunting itself, you can post all of those photographs and put captions on them and tell interesting stories. You could probably put videos in there too. And so you get some of those benefits that you would maybe for Facebook or something like that, where you're posting about your hunt there, but this is only with people that you specifically invite. So you can invite your friends and your family members and all that stuff, and you can shut different aspects of the hunt off to different people. Like he was telling me that his mom really likes seeing pictures of the people and the scenery and the animals, but didn't like the dead stuff. And so he would set it up in such a way where she just wouldn't see that stuff. She would see all of the other stuff involved in the hunt, but not the dead animals. And he showed the animals after he shot them to all of his other buddies and all of that stuff. And then he said too, which was also really cool, they have a service in there where you can pay extra and put a bunch of photos arranged however you want them in a physical book, and then have that book shipped to you. So you get the coffee table type book like that, as well as the digital service and everything. And so he has, in the end, he has a setup similar to what my friend has with the traditional, less expensive coffee table book, but just a little bit more expensive, but less time intensive too. So he said that he was waiting, for his plane at the airport to go home, and spent 30 minutes to an hour on his phone arranging everything in his Journey app to get the scrapbook set up, and bought it there, and he had it in his house in a couple weeks. And so he says that's something that he does for a lot of his memorable trips. And so he'll get a book for this hunt in Africa and a different book for this other vacation or something like that. So that was a really cool idea that I'd never heard of until he told me about it. So you can check it out if you want. I've never used it myself. He invited me to his, and I took a look at it, but that may be something that I do in the future. But it's called Journey, Journi. Now, my dad went a little bit different direction, and he has a shadow box set up in his office. And I think he has a couple different shadow boxes for different hunts. But he printed out photos from the different animals that he took. One of these hunts was in Namibia, and he got some of the Namibian medals associated with those specific animals, hung them up in the shadow box. Other different parts of the hunt, I think there were some porcupine quills and stuff in there too, and everything, and other little souvenirs he got from those trips to Africa. Put it all in the shadow box, have it displayed on the wall. And once again, this is something that's not that expensive, doesn't take up a lot of space, and gives you that way to memorialize the animals, preserve your memories, something for people to look at when they go in your office, that sort of thing. So that's another really cool way of doing it. So as we wrap up, basically, just don't get stuck in a rut. Don't feel like you have to do a bunch of traditional taxidermy or only do that. Think outside the box a little bit. Think of different ways that you can use to memorialize your hunt and fill all of those goals that I talked about earlier that are also really cool. I think a video is a great way of doing it. And like I said, that is a direction that I'm leaning heavily towards in the future. I'll combine maybe a shoulder mount here and there with some skull mounts or some non-traditional stuff like that with a video of the hunt. Maybe I'll start using the Journey app or something. But do a little bit of thinking about this stuff before you go on any more hunts, and see what different ways you can use to accomplish some of these things. And if you've given some of that stuff some thought before your hunt, it's easier to make those sort of decisions when they're asking, okay, what do you want me to do with this animal? You want me to do a shoulder mount of it or whatever? And if you want to do that, by all means do that. You can do this other stuff in addition to it, or you can, of course, do it instead of it. But I have found that I have gotten a lot of joy and a lot of use out of some of these other things that I have done over the years. Gosh, especially like that cartridge belt or, the purse that my wife has and all that stuff. I mean, those are things that every time I go hunting, I use that cartridge holder. She uses that purse darn near every day, all of that stuff. So give it some thought. And like I said, check out those other episodes that I mentioned earlier as far as traditional taxidermy goes. And that was episode 264 and episode 107. That's Logistics of Africa Part 2, Taxidermy, and then Taxidermy Best Practices. Check out that link in the show notes and check out that video that we made of the hunt for that former client. And also get yourself some Axel X-Core electronic earbuds for yourself. Click that other link in the show notes or go to thebiggamehuntingblog.com/earbuds for the best pricing. And then also click the other link in the show notes or go to huntingguns101.com. Sign up there to get my free ebook and join my email list. And please do me a big favor, hit that subscribe or follow button in whatever podcast app you're using if you enjoyed this episode, and please leave me a rating and or a review for the show as well. And doing those things helps me reach other hunters like you who enjoyed this sort of content, and you'll also start to receive my new episodes automatically every Thursday when I release them. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.